Therese Coffey, it's really good to see you this morning. Let's start, shall we, with what we may be expecting to hear from the Prime Minister tomorrow. I mean, I don't know how much detail you can go into, but it does feel that we're going to be seeing quite a significant change to the way things have been done in the past.
Well, I think it's fair to say that when we had a variety of regulations, we said we'd go back to Parliament every 6 months to see if those regulations were still necessary, but also some of the ideas that we wanted to consider and that are still part of the toolbox, like the vaccine passports. Again, we said we were considering bringing these items in, but it's important that the government, that we look at exactly what benefits that will bring. And right now, the Health Secretary indicated, although we haven't made the formal decision, that he does not think that it's necessary for the vaccine passports to be introduced by the end of the month. But the Prime Minister will be setting out tomorrow a lot more of the detail of the roadmap ahead, preparing for winter.
Presumably, though, the key words in what you were just saying there were for right now, for the time being. Isn't it just the case that all of these things, lockdown, mask wearing, social distancing, working from home, they all remain options that are on the table for the government?
I think that's fair, but it's our clear intention, recognising the success of the number of vaccinations that have happened, including particularly amongst young people, where there's been a really good take-up over the summer, that we want to do things which we consider only necessary to tackle the transmission of risk and the impact it has on the NHS. So it's really good news that we are seeing the success of the vaccine so far. So having done the jabs, we want to continue to try and get people into jobs. And that's why we're investing even more in infrastructure over the next decade too. Sure,
but you could be forgiven if you picked up the papers this morning that decisions on these things were set in stone. I mean, just on in terms of the chaos that there was in terms of vaccine passports, we were told last week by the Vaccines Minister that they were a reality and that they would be introduced. Yesterday, speaking to Sky, the Health Secretary said, "I'm not here today to rule it out." Then, in the taxi journey that he took over to the BBC, he performed a U-turn. Many people would say that's exactly what she'd do if you're getting a taxi to the BBC. But clearly, there is some mixed messaging here.
Well, I don't know about the sequencing yesterday. What I do know is that when I sat on the Cabinet Committee several months ago, where we discussed looking into vaccine passports, yes, there was an indication that we would be minded to bring that in towards the end of September, but we would review it at the right time. And as I say, that formal decision will be made and the outcome of that announced. But all the indications are from the Health Secretary is that we do not need to introduce the vaccine passports at the end of the month. You know, there's been good consideration of the ups and downs of how you'd implement it and similar. And I'm conscious that, as I say, the number of vaccinations has shot up again over the summer, and that's great news.
PCR tests, though, for travellers, the traffic light system, is it fair for me to assert that those are things that could be going pretty soon?
Well, I'm only aware of what the Health Secretary said yesterday about his consideration of where that might be heading. I think it's important, again, to just make sure all the tyres literally being kicked, to make sure all the effects that we were looking into, for example, the spread of the different variants, they've been picked up by doing the detailed PCR tests. That's why we've been able to respond. But I'm conscious right around the world, again, as we've seen the number of vaccinations increase, thus far, some of the more limited variants that have arisen have not been spreading right around the world, apart from the Delta, against which we are well protected.
Clearly, the nighttime industries will be very pleased if the vaccine passport scheme is going to be part, for the time being at least. But I do wonder what you make of, you know, for example, the Premier League. We've seen some very, very big clubs, Manchester United amongst them, that are introducing, if not mandatory checks on your vaccine status, then spot checks on people coming into the ground. I mean, what would the government say to them? To carry on as they are doing? Or should they be scrapping it in the same way that the government is?
Well, I think it's sensible of organisations, employers, to do the checks they think are necessary in order to protect public health. The difference is whether the government was going to require vaccine passports. But right around the country, people will be going into their places of work or other areas, and they are already being asked that sort of activity, have you got your 2 jabs and similar, in order to continue to try and protect, recognising we still have a high number of infections in this country on a daily basis, and we still want to keep trying to reduce that.
It's news that's broken this morning, so you may not be aware, but Valneva, who are in line to provide us with, 190 million doses of their vaccine, they're at stage 3 of the clinical process at the moment. That contract has been terminated. Why is that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Right, we will hopefully get some clarity on that a little bit later on in the day. But let's move to what you're here to discuss today, which is, of course, the investment, £650 billion worth of an investment in getting people back to work. Just explain a little bit about it and where that money is going to be spent.
Well, we're seeing a variety of ways the money will be spent, whether it's aspects of infrastructure, continuing support, but I think a more tangible element for your viewers would be £2.5 billion to go into rebuilding of schools or where repairs are needed there. I'm conscious that we expect that to include about 425,000 jobs being created. Mm-hmm. So we continue to make sure our plan for jobs, which we believe is working, but how we continue to invest in that so we can help people not only get back into work, but to get on in work and to increase their take-home pay. And that really matters to us.
How do you justify a Conservative assertion that you are committed to getting people back into work with removing the £20 uplift to universal credit?
Well, the £20 uplift was specific to recognise the shock that happened, particularly for people newly coming into benefits of what happened with coronavirus. We do want to make sure that people, as I say, are getting aspects of more training on skills. I think there's been over 80,000 apprenticeship starts, helped by the incentive we've given by employers to take people on. Over 60,000 young people are in Kickstart. But overall, we're seeing employment rise month after month after month, and we want to continue that people getting in, but also things like the Lifetime Skills Guarantee, helping them get better paid jobs.
Okay, even more straightforward question. Why are we getting rid of the £20 uplift?
Because it was a temporary measure recognised for the extent of the COVID pandemic.
I mean, that's not an answer. I mean, saying that it was a temporary measure, you could carry on with it if it was proved to be working effectively. It has been proved to be working effectively.
Well, in terms of you talk about working effectively, it was there. It was an element there to protect people, particularly those initially coming into benefits for the first time. We want to make sure we make the shift into all about plan for jobs, and it's the ongoing investment in that where we're seeing people get back into work, and we want people to get on in work.
I mean, this was the argument you gave, I think, actually on this programme back in July when we spoke last about this, that, you know, it's all about getting people back into work. But this is an in-work benefit.
Correct.
A third of people who are on it are in work. A third of people who are on it, basically, I'm playing around with the numbers slightly here, but a third of people are looking for work. You know, are you entirely happy with this?
Yes, we made this decision earlier in the year. The Chancellor announced it in the budget, and that's why we're building up the update to the plan for jobs to make sure that as we see the end of the furlough scheme, so the support that's happened there, as we see the end of the other support schemes that we've put in place during this time of COVID, that we accelerate our plan for jobs.
How does taking £1,000 away from some of the lowest, some of the poorest people in this country, how does that help them get back into work?
Well, it was a temporary stopgap, as I've pointed out, for people. The uplift was done. It made it in line with the statutory sick pay, the basic pay that people could have if they were out of work for other reasons. But I'm conscious that we want to keep working with our now 27,000 work coaches around the country. We've got over 200 extra job centres supporting people getting to work, but also to progress in work as well.
660,000 people, according to Unite the Union, 660,000 key workers will have a negative impact on their bank balance as a result of this. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation says 500,000 more people being pulled into poverty, including 200,000 children. Citizens Advice are warning that a third of people on universal credit will end up in debt when the extra payment is removed. All of those taken together, and you tell me that you personally are happy to see this go.
Well, if I think about the £20 up week, that's just about 2 hours of national minimum wage. That's why we are working through our work coaches with people on low pay who may well be in work about what we can do to help them get more hours or indeed to get the skills in order to get a higher paid job. We've already lifted the national minimum wage, so it's about 60% of median earnings.
500,000 people being dragged into poverty.
As I've pointed out, well, there's an element we can get into discussion about how poverty metrics are done, as whether they're relative measures and all the other things. The point is, there are definitely vacancies out there. We are there with 27,000 work coaches to help people, as I say, get into, but also get on in work. And that's what really matters as well, the progress that we can help people get on in work.
But let's just take all of this together. You know, we're seeing a cut to the universal credit uplift. We're seeing an increase in national insurance contributions. We're seeing plans to freeze the income tax personal allowance. Labour, and you can challenge the figures, they say that this will cost ordinary workers, social care workers, nurses, the like, £1,000 a year, more than that. Now, you may dispute the figures, but you're not going to sit there and tell me that people are going to be better off as a result of all those changes?
Well, I'm conscious that it's about 15% of the top earners who will pay for half of the total revenues of the new national insurance levy from next year. But there's all other sorts of support that we do put in to try and help people. If I think about the £6 billion that is spent on childcare, on average, that's about £5,000 per family that we put in there to help them support with those other measures. So there's a variety of ways that government tries to help families in order to be more prosperous, as well as structural elements like continuing to increase the national living wage.
But again, you're not telling me that people are going to be better off as a result of the next change, the income tax freeze, and indeed that's what we're talking about today, the universal credit uplift.
Well, what I'm saying is that in terms of aspects of jobs, for those people who only work a certain number of hours, we'll be seeing what we can do to help them perhaps increase that number of hours, but also recognising that we want to help them get a higher wage. And that's important. Things like the £650 billion, the 425,000 jobs with that. There's a real opportunity for people to upskill, and we're seeing that coming through.
Away from your brief, but one of your colleagues around the Cabinet table, Priti Patel has once again been found out to have been holding private meetings with on this occasion, with a billionaire of her acquaintance without informing officials until after the fact. This was, in essence, what she got sacked for before when she was International Development Secretary. When can we expect her resignation?
Well, I don't know the details of what you set out. What I'm aware of, that sometimes you do end up meeting people perhaps by accident, and you have a conversation. The important thing is you pass...
She didn't meet by accident, though. That's the whole point of this story. She arranged a meeting, took place in a hotel. She knew it was coming.
You know, one of the things, if you are not there with the private secretary, is that you pass the information on to the officials, and then it's dealt with by the private office. I know my own experience, you sometimes do see people, as long as you pass on the information, that's what matters, to make sure that the civil servants have the record and they can declare that in the appropriate way. Shouldn't
that declaration be made in advance of a meeting and not after it, potentially when someone finds out that you've been having a meeting and you rush to give the Permanent Secretary a phone call?
Well, I don't know now the precise details of what you're referring to. I've met somebody actually while I was on holiday, didn't know them at all, but it turns out they were a supplier to DWP. So again, I share the fact that by chance at somebody's party, I met somebody who was there. So it's those sorts of things where I don't know the details of Priti, but it's important we just make sure it's transparent in that regard with our civil servants, and they can use the information accordingly.
You are the very vision of probity. Therese Coffey, good to have you in the programme. Thanks for joining us.